Your bio's been on our website, so. Hello? Hey, everybody, please find your seats if you would. Okay. Well, as I am prone to say, hello, Tiger Bay. Hello. Okay, welcome to our program today. We're very, very excited to demystify a topic of some confusion out there in the world. So I think this is a great opportunity for us to really understand better some changes that have taken place and how we're looking at redevelopment and how that's paid for and handled. So we have an absolutely blue ribbon panel, and as usual, I don't spend a lot of time on that, but before we do anything, we're going to salute the flag, so please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I don't know, I look around and I see some newcomers are fairly newcomers, so just to give you a couple of little ground rules for Tiger Bay before we launch into our program. First, I hope you have actually read the bios of our distinguished panel on our program before you signed up to come here. So, but we are very fortunate to have with us Ron Allen, who is NDC Construction, Dave Bishop, who is a extremely highly regarded architect and person who's a somewhat expert on green. Ed Hunziker, who, if you don't know him by now, you can't possibly live here, is the county administrator for Manatee County, and Norm Lupino, who's a realtor with Sarah Bay Real Estate. And so we're going to look at the TIF issue from several different dimensions. But in order to start, we thought we'd let Ed, the order we'll do is Ed will speak first because he's the only person probably that can truly explain this to everybody. And so he has promised to baffle us with a clear explanation. And following that, we're just going to go in order alphabetically as we're prone to do so that there's no particular favoritism. Everybody's being timed. The talks will be 7 to 9 minutes. And if you hear my little phone ring, I am not receiving a phone call. That's the signal for the speaker that their 9-minute time limit is arrived. And then we'll do questions. To ask a question, you must be a member of Tiger Bay and identify yourself as such. And the golden rule, although it's a variable, is civility. So we have discussion. We have sometimes very different points of view represented at Tiger Bay. We try to be nonpartisan, but representative of many different perspectives on issues and keep it clean because it's being televised. So anyway, with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ed.
Well, thank you. Good afternoon. The Southwest TIF. Now, we've been working on a new name for that because the TIF is the device that we propose to use to redevelop the urban core of Manatee County. I noticed in my notes that I was here on this same subject called How Will We Grow back in December of 2010. And I thought maybe I could give that same speech and see if who remembered it. The problem is I've never written a speech, so I don't remember exactly what I said in 2010. But the concept is that we need to redevelop the urban core. We started in 2010. We provided the board with 3 options for how we could grow over the next 30 years. The first option was we could grow like we've always grown, which is helter-skelter. Wherever somebody says they need a new sewer line or a new road, we'll do it. The second one was we should focus on the urban core and redevelop. That's where we already have infrastructure in place. Most of the roads are in place. Water lines and sewer lines are there. And the third option was what we call activity centers, and there were 5 of those identified. After we went through that exercise, we brought in the Urban Land Institute to look at our plan. They delivered a report. If you haven't seen it, it's on our website. And in that report, they re-emphasized the need for redeveloping the urban core. Along 41 corridor is where the county started its development many years ago, decades ago, and it's the part that needs a little work. We started looking at the tax base in the county, and over the years that the tax base was declining during the recession, the property in that portion of the county declined greater than the rest of the county at a faster pace. And as we started to pick up a year ago, it didn't pick up as fast as the rest of the county. It lags behind in development. The TIF area, I was told I can't move away from the microphone or those fellows over here will come smack me. But over there on the right-hand side, the TIF area generally covers from Manatee Avenue south to the Sarasota line and from 301 west to the water. It replaces what we had, which was 2 CRAs. Both of those we've eliminated in the past year. The 2 of them were created in about the early 2000s. For the most part, the South County CRA rode up a false real estate market, and then when the crash came, it rode it back down again. They weren't big enough to do much in the way of major redevelopment. They didn't invest much of the money in anything that created value. They did some great societal issues, but the key was to how do you create value to stimulate economics, to stimulate job growth, to stimulate value. And from the ULI report, we took from that the need to expand and to think bigger. Be bold was the word from ULI, be bold. So we took it upon ourselves to create this tax increment financing district with the intent that it's a 30-year plan. Now, for those that expect a lot, remember, we've only been in business for a month. We haven't hired anybody. We have a plan, we have a vision of where we're going to go. The idea is to redevelop the urban core, one neighborhood at a time, if you will. There are neighborhoods that were developed before the current comp plan regulations were in place. They don't have sidewalks, and they don't have sidewalks because they have a swale. They have a swale because they don't have stormwater other than that swale. And because they have a swale, they don't have a curb on the road, and they probably don't have street lights. So you take your life in your hand if you're out walking your dog this time of the year in the evening when you get home from work. Well, we're going to work with those neighborhoods to help them develop a plan where we can partner in the redevelopment of the neighborhood to provide them that stormwater pipe in the ground in that swale, put some dirt over it, put a sidewalk in, put a curb on that street, put some street lights up, finance that over time on a shared basis between the TIF and the neighborhood. The neighborhood can create an MSTU or an MSBU, and we will share in the cost of the redevelopment. That's called our Neighborhood Improvement Program. We will also work with businesses to help the businesses spruce up their frontage. We have a plan to work with FDOT on their plan on the 15th Street corridor and partner with them as they're doing the construction. We'll do the work with the businesses alongside 15th Street to help spruce up their businesses and work with them on how we can help. All of this is geared to making increased value in the properties in the neighborhoods to stimulate economic growth. What we're trying to do also is work with the universities. We have 4 higher educational institutions in the southwest quadrant of the county. 2 just happen to be on the other side of the border in Sarasota County. So we're working with the city of Sarasota and Sarasota County, or will be shortly. We have met with those leaders of those 4 institutions on a couple of occasions to talk about what it is that they need to do to create an identity for that part of the county and what we can do to help them do what they do, which is recruit students. But more than recruit the students, how do we keep the students? What do we need to do as a community to keep them in our community? Create that identity, help them. We've enlisted the airport in this endeavor. We've enlisted FDOT, and we'll work with our partners to the south in Sarasota County to help those 4 institutions grow students and grow future residents to this county. All of that is part of the plan to make the urban core better. We will also be working on rewriting our land development code and our comp plan to focus on the southwest quadrant. Those that understand land development code and comp plan know that our current rule book, as I call it, is mainly guided towards people developing property on the east side of 75. If you've got a large tract of land and want to build 1,000 homes, we've got the plan for you. It doesn't do much for somebody that might own 3 acres on the west side, because by the time you deal with setback, stormwater, and parking, you can't build much of anything. So we need to revisit how we're going to do redevelopment, given our rule book. And we'll be coming back to the board with redeveloping the urban core and how we could better effectuate that in rewriting the rule book and help the businesses do what they need to do to be more productive on the west side. All of that is going to take time, going to take a little money. The TIF as we proposed it will benefit from 50% of the proceeds of the growth portion, not 100%. We believe that 50% of the money that comes out of the growth portion of property values ought to go to the general fund to provide basic government services, public safety, libraries, parks on a countywide basis. And the TIF will take 50% and use those dollars over time to develop that southwest quadrant as the plans develop. We haven't put many rules in place to start this process because I've found out over the years, as soon as government puts a rule in place, somebody's going to show up and be on the wrong side of the rule. Yep. So we shouldn't be too quick to develop the rules. We'll let this evolve over time. The focus is on neighborhoods and the focus is on business districts to help them redevelop as they think their neighborhoods need to develop. We don't want the government to be in the business of telling them what they need. It's working with them in partnership as to how they see growth in their neighborhood, what they need in their neighborhood, and how we can help them. With that, I think I'll stop and I'll let the next speaker go before your phone goes off. How'd I do?
You have 8 seconds left.
Good.
You did fabulous.
Thank you.
Here you go.
You mean I'm done already?
No.
Oh, okay.
He's done.
Thank you very much. My name is Ron Allen. I'm president of NDC Construction Company, and I've been asked to speak today regarding the Southwest TIF district. We have some experience working with TIFs. If you recall, back in the 80s and 90s, there was a location in Bradenton called Bradenton Village, which was a very dilapidated, flooded. It was on the newspapers all the times. It was probably one of the most important projects that Bradenton needed to accomplish. They were fortunate to get a Hope 6 grant, but that wasn't near enough to be able to accomplish all the construction and development that was necessary to redo that area. That's where the TIF funding came into play. Without that, a lot of the infrastructure that was related to the areas around Bradenton Village would not have been able to have been accomplished. The thing that I really want to talk today about the Southwest TIF, if you look at, as Ed described, they had 2 CRA districts with TIF funding in them. The Bradenton has 3, and Palmetto has 1. In the past, the TIF and the districts were set mainly within that certain redevelopment area, and only that redevelopment area. And what that does is it starts creating that ability to redevelop, but it's really hard to accomplish because you're still only dealing in that certain area that's in transition to begin with. And so those incremental TIF dollars that come in grow at a very slow pace unless you have an unplanned or exceptional event. In the case of Bradenton Village and the city's CCRA, Tropicana's expansion really put the TIF dollars into the system that allowed Bradenton Village to occur. And I think that's one of the real important things about this new district. It takes the transition area of Southwest County, and it adds a number of other areas to it that can really affect the ability to do the TIF funding quicker and have more substantial impact. And as an example, we have a project that's going to be coming forward, Lake Flores. When that thing is built out, I think the estimates are around 1.9 or $2 billion worth of real estate value that's going to be created in that area. Well, guess what? Those dollars, because I think right now, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's an agricultural use right now. It doesn't take a brain surgeon to figure out the difference in that TIF dollars from agriculture to the finished product, pretty strong. I think that is an extremely important component of how we make our redevelopment of our urban areas go. It now is going to flood money in developments like that are in different areas, not in transition areas, but in new areas. It's funneling those dollars to be able to go back into those transition areas and do the things as Ed described. We have a number of subdivisions in the Southwest County that, as Ed described, don't have the infrastructure to be true new communities. This allows money to come in, so you're not trying to put that whole price tag either on the taxpayers out of county revenue or out of homeowners associations that don't have the money to do those things. I have a hard time when somebody tells me that everybody doesn't benefit from this TIF kind of funding, because it opens up a whole arena for the individual small business owner on 41 to be able to do some things that they couldn't normally do because there just wasn't dollars available to do it. This is, I think, is such an exciting, and it breaks down, as Ed described, to the homeowners associations. That's the basis of our community, and this is going to give them financial ability to do things in their communities to make them more aesthetic, better for the future, safer. I don't know where that funding would come from if we didn't have this type of system in place. The infrastructure in the redevelopment areas, I am an infill developer. I don't mass produce subdivisions out east as Ed described. And one of the things that needs to go forward with this TIF district is exactly what was just described. The land use regulations have to change. I can't deal with a 1.5 or 2 acre site, and I have to be 50 feet off the road. And then I have to put a 6-foot sidewalk, and then I have to put storm, and then I have to put a parking lot. As Ed described, I end up with a photo hut on 3 acres. It doesn't work, and that's the only thing that's going to allow those redevelopment areas to start coming back in. And it is amazing when you watch, when one business owner redevelops or repurposes his property, that just lends itself to continue on to the next and the next. All of a sudden you got a pretty nice area going. And what does that do? That raises the taxes. That raises the taxable value, which then turns around, puts more money in the TIF to be able to do more things. It's just really an impressive project, and I think the county had great foresight in being able to expand that area beyond just the traditional or the transitional area that they originally trying to affect. And I think that takes the county commissioners have to be proactive, and they have to be pro-economic on these things. It was very nice to see, as a result of the elections, Carol Whitmore is again with us for another 4 years. I'd like to congratulate her on that. And I know she's been part of this whole economic drive to get this TIF funding district put in place. And then we have Charles Smith. Want to congratulate him for his election. And it was nice to read in the newspaper, Charles, that economic development and revitalization is one of your pillar components. And we couldn't ask for a better person to be doing that in that process. So we're excited about where the future of this Southwest Florida, Southwest tax TIF district goes. And I think the opportunities are endless to be able to create the Bradenton and Manatee County across the board instead of focusing on certain areas. I think we can bring everybody up in the process. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to the next speaker.
Oh, you're terrific. You got 2 minutes left.
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm probably going to break a record for not using all my time, so just bear with me. Again, my name is David Bishop with Guardian Associates. We're an architecture and planning firm in Palmetto. I'm going to take a step back just for 1 second because you've heard a lot about the future and where we're kind of going with this TIF, but I have been volunteering on a number of advisory boards around throughout Manatee County and the city of Bradenton over the years, and I spent 10 years on the CRA for the 14th Street West Advisory Board. Now, we all know the county commissioners are the actual CRA, but I spent a lot of time in a lot of meetings with people in the neighborhoods that Ed had talked about. And that neighborhood of 14th Street West was mostly commercial in nature. And if you want to go back to when it was started, it was about 2002, I believe, is when it was enacted. It was since dissolved earlier this year. And redevelopment is a great thing, but it's a very complicated tool. And there are hurdles when you go through redevelopment with public funds. So the process that we came from was a monthly meeting. We would sit down and we would discuss the issues. And as Ed had pointed out before, how do you get those sidewalks and lighting and all those things that are important to the people within the district? Now, the commercial side, they were all about crime and preventing it. So they were focusing us on that. The neighborhoods that were kind of on the skirts of our district, and our district started on 14th Street right at the city line and went all the way down to Cortez and 41, where currently is the Best Buy Lowe's Plaza. But off that main drag, there are little pockets of residential. And those people were looking for safety also and improvements to sidewalks and street lights. So I was very excited in 2002, or I think I was on 2003, I started on that board. And I was like, wow, this is great. We're going to be part of this neighborhood and we're going to hopefully affect positive change. Well, some of the quick statistics I was dealing with early on, that street back then where Lowe's and Best Buy is at used to have an old Kmart on it. And it had lived its livelihood and it wasn't doing very well at the time. And the first round, the first year, in fiscal year 2004, we got our first numbers of what we would get to play with. And it was exactly $33,000, almost to the penny, $33,000. And we all looked around and said, wow, we just spent a couple of years talking to neighborhoods, talking up a big game, and we got $33,000 we can reinvest. So what do you do with $33,000? There's not much. We then worked with people within the county, talking about planning and try to visioning it, going for that future thing. But from that $33,000, it did get better. When Best Buy was redeveloped about 2007, if my facts are right, our tax increment, which is what all this is all about, it jumped. And because of that Best Buy development, we're starting to rake in a little bit more money. Every year it got better and better, and we peaked at 2009 at $498,000. Well, finally, in 2009, now remember I started 2004, 5 years, we're finally getting some real money in the district. But again, it doesn't buy a lot. So we had to prioritize what was important. We listened to the residential component, the commercial component, and the best we could do with the time that we had, we got some street lighting initiatives. Half of them are done, still half are not. We did get some sidewalk and some median improvements you might be aware of. That's near the Best Buy, that was part of it, but that was also helped with other grants. I learned very quickly in this long process of 10 years that size matters, because we are less than 1 square mile. And I don't know the square mileage of this bigger TIF, but when the idea was floated, well, we're going to dissolve you or your advisory board in this, and we're going to be part of this bigger district. Of course, we had some advisory board members that were, nope, don't like that. We've already invested all this time and effort. But I kind of looked at it and said, well, you know, it's a bigger pool. Obviously, we got a 30 or 40-year lifespan on our CRA, and we spent 10 years of it, and we're barely squeaking by money, and we're actually asking for help everywhere else. So again, the personal time I spent on the board, I felt like, well, it's okay. I'm going to sit back and let's see what happens with it. And even though some of our advisory board members weren't sold on it, I still think for the greater good of 14th Street West Advisory Board, or that area, it was the best thing to do. Now, a couple of quick things, and I'll finish up, is you might have heard of the Midtown Manatee branding. That was part of some of those little dollars that we were able to get out. There's a website. And I can't thank the CEDC and Karen Stewart and Sherry Corrier and Ivan Groom and everybody who put that extra effort into making those little dollars do big things. So at the end of this, I just want to kind of finish up real quickly. As of the last time our CRA Advisory Board met, we did accumulate $693,000 in that CRA district. Now, that's money that still, I believe, has to be reinvested in the district, and it will be spent, but it was raised and it will still go into that fund. But we have maintenance issues, the street lighting, none of that's free, but I think that's where it's going to go to. So with that, my part was the history of it, and thank you very much.
Okay.
They set a high bar.
All right, thank you very much. My name is Norm Lapino. I'm a realtor with Sarah Bay, and prior to that, I was a planner for Manatee County for 23 years. And I actually live in the proposed, the new TIF. I previously also was a member of the South County CRA Advisory Board. So TIFs are great tools, and they have great potential if used with the right application. I think everybody knows about Sarasota. 30 years ago, they created a TIF downtown. And I think the last time I read, they raised $78 million and completely transformed Sarasota into what it is now. So they do have a lot of positive aspects of them. The TIF that we have is so large, and it has a lot of challenges. And I'm not saying they can't be overcome, but I'm just going to go through some of the challenges that I see as somebody who lives there and somebody with my background in real estate and in planning. The area is very large and it's very diverse. If you look at the TIF, you have everything from Pride Park to Palmasola Park. Completely different needs in those communities. You also have to remember that it's got a 30-year life. There is a lot of lack of guidelines in the existing ordinance, which could be somewhat problematic. When you talk about it's our intent to do this in these kind of terms, you have to remember commissions change, power structures change. The commission that's in place today won't be there probably in 20 years, and definitely won't be there in 30 years unless Betsy stays on at the age of 85 and is still there. So anyways, I had to throw that off. Okay, so I mean, we have to have, and you don't want to tie it down too specific, but you need some guidelines so that future boards understand what the intents are that we're talking about today. There is nothing in the ordinance that talks about the distribution of money. We've talked about what the intents are, but there's nothing actually in the ordinance for this board or future boards to comply with. I've been around for a long time in government, and I do know how the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And the most vocal organizations, organized organizations, can pull more weight and get more into their area. And so that's something to consider. The area in question also is an area that does not have a lot of organized homeowners associations. It's an older area. It's not like East County. When I go to sell homes in this area, most of the time we don't have to include a disclosure that there's a homeowners association. There's usually not even voluntary homeowners association, so it's very fragmented. Pride Park is an example of that. There was no organized structure except for our South County CRA, so we were able to act as their vocal mouthpiece, and they were represented. And so that's going to be an issue that we're going to have to overcome in order for this to be successful. And we're also talking about commercial and residential, and there's one thing I just want to point out, and I'm not an expert at commercial, but I've worked with a lot of developments in the past, and I do know that commercial tends to follow residential. When East County was developed, the residential came out first, and then the commercial followed. So the commercial entities, you typically look at not only rooftops, but they also look at the buying power. That's why you can go into highly populated, distressed neighborhoods, and there are no viable commercial establishments in there. So in order to effectively raise the commercial, you have to raise the residential first, unless you have a tourist-oriented type commercial business. But I mean, you have to have strong residential neighborhoods, and that's the key to any revitalization plan. And the key to any revitalization plan he basically has three components: new development, redevelopment, and preservation and conservation of existing neighborhoods. And there's a lot of neighborhoods in this area that don't need to be redeveloped, but they need a boost. They need an extra lift. They're struggling. Older neighborhoods are quite fragile. And when you have redevelopment, you have to make sure that you're very sensitive to the existing developments that are there and not just focus on the redevelopment that's not compatible or not consistent with what is currently there. I mean, there are some very, very strong neighborhoods in this TIF area, but they're also very fragile and they need help. As a realtor, I'll tell you, there's nothing more discouraging to look at a nice picture in a paper in the MLS, take a customer out, and have the customer drive down the road and see yards full of cars, derelict vehicles, and these kind of things, because that, not preserving your neighborhoods and being on top of them will help kill a neighborhood faster than anything else. So, in conclusion, I just want to say the TIF is a very good and a very powerful tool. It just has to be applied properly, and I'm concerned with the lack of guidelines that are actually in there. It talks about redevelopment. A lot of the neighborhoods don't need redevelopment, they need preservation. So you have to balance redevelopment, preservation, and new development, and that needs to be a very important thing that we need to consider. So thank you very much.
Excuse me, I'm tripping over the tablecloth. Okay, it's time for questions, and you know the drill. Everybody, please use the microphone because this is being filmed, and if your question can't be heard, it's a problem. So if we have a question, step up to the mic, please, and state your name, that you're a member of Tiger Bay, and also to whom your question is addressed, or if it happens to be addressed to everybody, that's fine too.
Marla Huff with Huff Engineering, and I'm a Tiger Bay member. Recently, the city of Bradenton's been spending a lot of money redoing some of their water system. I was talking with Kim Clayback, their engineer, and she said it was either a fourth to a third of them that they're replacing back in that Wares Creek Ballard neighborhood, and they're replacing them before they break. That's the goal of everybody. But I didn't know if TIFs would pay for water main replacements, because that's something that's common in your old neighborhoods. And I have one other question other than that for David.
Okay.
The answer to the question about paying for utility cost, our utility system is well funded, and the utility system has a financing plan to pay for the cost of replacing the worn out assets of the utility system. I don't see the TIF necessarily paying for those costs.
Okay.
Your question for David?
Yes,
Oh,
please.
go ahead, Ron.
The only piece of that that I think is a little different than that is, as a developer, when you come into an infill area, redevelopment area, there's a lot of off-site stuff that tends to have to be done because of those aged-old systems. Now, while Ed is volunteering, and I wrote that down for my next project, that the county is well-funded and will take care of those, most of the time when you go in for those approvals, some of those off-site improvements are part of your development process. And so by having that TIF, I think the TIF would be available to assist in certain projects to be able to accomplish some of those off-sites. So it didn't come out of the standard utility side of the equation. So that's my only point.
Maybe.
In case you didn't hear that, Ed said maybe.
Then my question for David, I've seen the 14th Street median improvements, and at first they were beautiful, and then there was a period of time where there were weeds growing, and we're like, wait a minute, you guys, you know, you need to weed this. And then eventually somebody figured that out, and it started getting weeded, and I just was curious, was the maintenance for that from the TIF?
Yes, it was, and I'm glad you pointed that out, because after it was originally installed, my first phone call was to Sherry Corrier and Kieran Stewart, and since that time we realized it was growing out of what we considered reasonable growth. We did spend a lot of extra time having the landscaping redone in some areas because it may not have been the best plant material, but it was all designed by a landscape architect, and at the time when we moved forward, we thought that was the best thing. But yes, maintenance is part of the deal.
Yeah, because weeds was some of it too, which is, you know, that happens.
Yeah, unfortunately, that was it was a learning curve for the board itself.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mary. It's our newest newest Tiger Bay member. Welcome to Tiger Bay, Mary Shepard.
Yes, this is like last month. I'm here because of this particular location. I support highly redevelopment and looking at our county and seeing where. But I keep asking the question, how far above sea level is this area? Sea level is going to rise, and to me, the last place we should be doing this is in the area that needs it, but for what purpose? To be flooded? So I'd like to hear. No one has ever answered except him. He said his house was at 14 feet above. My house is also at 14 feet above sea level. But what about this whole area? Is it the place that we should be doing this? And
We can get an answer for you, but I have not heard one person say that we are under threat of, with the global warming issue and sea level rise, where anywhere in the foreseeable future, this entire area is at risk. Now, perhaps sometime in future millennials, there could be a problem, but I haven't heard of that, Mary.
well, I know that there are places around in Florida that are thinking ahead and figuring out what they should be planning for as the sea level rise happens. No, we don't know for sure how quick it's going to get here, but some of the things I read say it's going to be here lots quicker than we think, and will move very fast. Could move very fast, or it might not.
Yeah.
But we need to, and other places have looked at this and are being encouraged to, even in Florida, according to what I see on the internet. So I would presume.
Does anybody
that
else want
someone-
to address that? Is that something developers think about? Is that a? Apparently not.
That's what I was afraid of.
Yeah.
Because
Thank you.
Well, since 1985, I've been aware there is a problem and we should address it, and I've been very well aware of the fact all around Florida, people are refusing to, along the coast, do it. Sorry.
Well, and South Florida is offering us many lessons, so, yeah. Thank you, Mary. Chris?
My name is Chris Willie, and I am a member of Tiger Bay, and I have several questions, I think, for Ed. Who makes the final decision on disbursements? County staff?
Board of County Commissioners.
Board of County Commissioners?
Yes, sir.
Second part of my question is, CRAs are under sunshine laws. TIFs are not. Will meetings be publicly noticed? Will people be able to go to those meetings and provide input? Or will they be behind closed doors?
This will be a very public process because, let me take for an example a neighborhood that we work with. As we work with a neighborhood that needs stormwater and you put a pipe in the ground and you put the sidewalk in and the streetlights, they're going to need to create either an MSTU or a BU. That will take a year to put one of those in place. As we go through that process of estimating the cost and setting up the financing mechanism, we will come through a budget process. There will be multiple meetings in front of the Board of County Commissioners, for the budget and the budget workshops, as well as meetings for the creation of the, and public hearings for the creation of the MSTU or the MSBU. All of this will be noticed, it will publicized, it will take well over a year to put any of that in place. So for anybody to think that some event will take place where the staff will go out and visit with the neighborhood and bulldozers will start moving in short order, it will be at least a year, perhaps 2 years, before any dirt starts moving, and multiple public meetings before that.
One final question. Is a TIF able to make direct grants to private businesses for their improvements of their property, or even freeze their property taxes?
No.
Okay. Thank you.
Misty.
Hello, my name is Misty Servia. I am a Tiger Bay board member, and my question is for Ed. So I'm sorry, you just sat down.
Oh, gosh, you just sat down.
So one of the criticisms that I've read in the newspaper of this TIF is that it's just another way for, money to be funneled to developers. And while I don't think that that's a fair statement, it is something that our Board of County Commissioners who are elected need to be aware of. And so, in my mind, as a member of the Chamber's Infill Committee, and as we have identified Manatee Avenue as a very important place for redevelopment, and as Norm stated, and I'm sorry for being too long here, there aren't a lot of homeowners associations. We don't have a lot of organization in this area. I live in a neighborhood like that. So here's my question. How are you going to prioritize the spending? And my hope is that the prioritization of the spending is going to be in the areas that will have the greatest impact on the overall TIF, like Manatee Avenue, which would raise up a lot of people. So could you address that?
Yes.
Thank you.
The impact that we want to create is first and foremost on neighborhoods. We understand the business community, but I think the help we give Manatee Avenue is in the form of rewriting the land development code and the comp plan for making those more viable for redevelopment. It's not so much in taking money and putting money there, it's in the rule book. The money is more directed at how do we help neighborhoods redevelop or protect the neighborhoods that are currently there and in maintaining their existing neighborhood. But it's a neighborhood focused activity, but the neighborhoods don't necessarily have to worry or are dependent on the land development code and the comp plan. That's more the businesses in that district and how do they thrive and improve their operations. And that comes about through the land development code and the comp plan. I hope that helps.
Norm Lupino. I just want to say I agree 100% with the intent of what Ed has stated. My concern is the vagueness of the ordinance. There's nothing in there that actually outlines that or even identifies that as an objective. And this is a 30-year plan. Who's going to be there in 10 years, for instance, that's on the current commission? I think it would have been nice if the word conservation or preservation or something to that effect was put in the ordinance to actually direct future commissioners. That is what the goal is. Right now, the distribution of money issue is so ambiguous that it could be used to benefit one specific geographic neighborhood in Northwest Bradenton, which would have no impact on the area in South County, which is different than the port TIF, where you do something in the port, it benefits everybody. The downtown Sarasota one does. Newtown, which is another CRA that has this. So the diversity of this community and the size of it, you almost really need to have some more generalized objectives and goals in the ordinance to make sure that this is actually going to work for everybody.
Okay, thank you. Ben?
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Bacher. I'm a Tiger Bay member. My question, I believe, would go to Norm, being with your background in residential real estate. I was one of those people who was fortunate enough to buy my first home in Bayshore Gardens in 2004, and immediately watch the value plummet every year thereafter until I had to sell it for probably about $5, you know, three years ago. As somebody who literally firsthand watched that go down, I agree with your statement on you know, commercial following residential, and you know, businesses looking at the you know, income and amount of heads in the area. You mentioned that these areas and these neighborhoods, especially the ones with no homeowners associations, need a boost. In your opinion, since you are kind of in the trenches and selling homes and dealing with homeowners, what do you feel that boost looks like? Is it a boost aesthetically to the area, or is it a boost with infrastructure and underground things? What do you feel delivers the boost you're talking about? And I guess after your answer, deferring a question to Mr. Hunsaker of how to execute what Mr. Lupino feels is the best use of money to improve those areas.
And it's a great question, and it's a great neighborhood, Bayshore Gardens. I mean, it has one of the best amenities in the entire county. Actually, both the aesthetics and the infrastructure. Reclaimed water, you have some major lines going through that community, but there's no distribution of those. And one of the biggest complaints you get about Bayshore Gardens is the yards are all dead. Well, people can't afford to water them because, you know, it's very costly. But if, you know, we could use some of the TIF money to create reclaimed lines going through the community, they could actually, that kind of infrastructure could actually be a big boost. The other are code issues. Code violations are prevalent in Bayshore. You drive through Bayshore, in some areas it looks like a war zone, but in some areas it looks very nice. So a stronger code enforcement presence. Yard parking is a major problem, commercial vehicles all over. And those kind of things, you know, you need to have some teeth in the code enforcement in order for places like Bayshore to move up. So both will work.
Did you want to add anything? No? Okay. Betsy.
Hi, Betsy Benak, and I'm a member. And my question is primarily for Ron Allen. Recognizing that one of the big goals, and I served on the Chamber infill committee for many years, but our goal then and our goal now, I think, as a county is to see redevelopment of some of these well-worn corridors, 14th Street, US 41, Cortez, Manatee Avenue. As a developer, what kind of things do we need to do to get redevelopment? What are some of the things that would make that attractive for infill development? Because I think that's what we're looking for.
Well, if I had all those answers, I probably wouldn't be here today. But I think part of it is really going towards the uses and how you do your land development code. And I think allowing those corridors to do things that you wouldn't do east of the interstate really draw a long way, because when it comes down to it, a developer looks at a piece of property, they find out how much it costs to develop, they find out what the user is and what the user is willing to pay. It's simple math. I mean, I hate to think, I don't want to tell everybody my job's simple, because I think it's a little complicated, but it is pretty simple. It's those economics. And so the things that affect those economics are the ability to put more on it, to the ability to better situate something on a piece of property, and it's if there are incentives out there that help you draw some activity or some user that would normally not come there. because there's a threshold for users that they're going to pay economically to come somewhere. And as we can see with the opening of UTC, there's not a real big problem with getting those high-end users coming to our community in a location like that. You're not going to see that on the 14th Street at this point. But there are users that are very valuable to our community that we could bring to the community, but they have an economic threshold, and anything incentives can do to help that would be beneficial. The last thing, the one thing I disagree with Norm a little bit, and I think a lot of his stuff is really on target of what we do in the future, is I would resist the county commission, and I'm going to speak to Vanessa and Larry and Betsy and Carol and Charles, is I would not make this so tight to not give flexibility. None of us, county commissioners, individual business owners, or real estate developers, we're not doing business the same way we did 3 years ago, 5 years ago, 10 years ago. I'd hate to put systems in place that tie your hands to be flexible enough that if an IMG comes to town, or if another UTC or some other activity comes to town that becomes a game changer for our community, I sure don't want you be sitting up there arguing about what paragraph says what in the thing. I think the commissioners, they're voted in to make those kind of decisions, and I think we ought to leave them enough flexibility to make those decisions. So.
Sure.
Okay.
Briefly.
All right, just briefly, it's not my intent to have strict guidelines. I think there just needs to be general objectives, which is different than having strict guidelines as to how the money should be distributed.
Yes, David, please.
Just real brief, I think I can see a little both sides of the issue on it. When I saw, remember I came from the history in the small neighborhood looking at the bigger neighborhood. I think what's important is that in this bigger pool, it's a competition to get the best projects that benefit the whole district. It's competition more than being stuck with this little teeny boundary that was not doing anything or as much. And I hope the process moving forward is that this, whatever gets developed and all these funds go for, it is competition for the best and brightest projects.
That's good. Chris?
One more question. We've been talking in broad general terms, and I'd like to talk about something very, very specific. What would a TIF need to do to give DeSoto Square better opportunity to succeed? What would you do to those neighborhoods around there to lift them up? And how could you help the mall's owners improve the property?
Okay, David?
Yep. Our CRA, the 14th Street West, is adjacent to the mall. And about 4 or 5 years ago, we approached them to be part of our CRA, and the current ownership rejected being part of our CRA development. Now, I know a lot of things have changed over the years, but before we were going on the road to being dissolved, we were in discussions with them again to be part of our CRA. It's just unfortunate the timing just didn't work out with the mall. But we were always focused because they would come to some of our meetings and we would try to involve them as much as we could, but we didn't have any dollars we could throw their way because at the time they weren't within our boundary.
So,
It's a good question. One of the things that we look at is partnerships. This is not an opportunity to throw government money at anybody. With the neighborhoods, we plan on partnering with the neighborhoods. They're going to have to put up some money, and the TIF would put up some money to lift the neighborhood. As it relates to businesses, we look for the business to have a vision. Everybody needs to have a vision. From a vision will come a plan. But if the people that are owning the mall don't have a vision, well, who are we to come in and tell them what to do? They would have to come up with what it is that they think they want to make of that property, and then how could we help? It's not for us to go in and tell them what could happen. The surrounding neighborhoods will work with the neighborhoods one by one, but I don't think it's the government's position to go to the mall folks and tell them what they need to do, because they'd probably throw us out to begin with. But it just has to start with a vision, and the owners need to have a vision, and I'm not so sure they're there.
any further questions? Dave, please.
I don't know if I'm a a member or not, so.
Well, we'll
I
get
don't, I don't,
you.
I don't know if I'm violating bylaws here.
If you're not a member, we'll sign you up.
Throw stuff at me. Good afternoon, everybody. So, you know, the TIF district here now abuts, or does abut, and has abutted the Bradenton CRAs in the past and in the present. I would love to, you know, I mean, we partner with the county right now on so many different initiatives, and I would love to have an opportunity to continue that, volunteer my time, our board's time, or, you know, I mean, I guess I can't speak for them, but I'd certainly speak for myself, and I know I'd have the mayor's blessings on this. You know, it's the strength in numbers thing. So, you know, there's always things that we can learn from each other. And so I would like to go on record and say, you know, the Bradenton CRAs would gladly partner and step up to the plate and volunteer our time with the county. The county has done so many amazing things for us already, and we just would like to reciprocate.
Great point, Dave. Partnerships, again, are incredibly important. Partnering with the city on what we're doing and what the city's doing is excellent. The two CRAs that existed, they still exist in our minds because those folks are critically important to us in continuing their efforts. They may not be an advisory board as they are today, but they're still people, they're still there interested, we still want to meet with them. It's important to keep those relationships up. We're not looking to exclude anybody. We're looking to gather up as many folks and in many parts of this TIF district to bring them in to make sure they feel part of this in designing what's going to happen over the next 30 years.
Okay.
We're with you.
Thank you.
I guess I could exercise my privilege to ask a question since there's nobody standing at the mic and I'm here and I've got a mic. So I'd like a little clarity, and anyone could speak to this, but as you're talking, you know, the TIF district is, and the county is not going to suggest or advise or direct people. You're waiting for visionary people to come into areas that have fallen into disrepair or into old age or whatever, as many of us are. But I thought of the number of times there have been somewhat visionary plans for US 41, for the trail, for that terrible strip that is the welcome mat to our city for so many people coming south to north. That, you know, I know Chambers worked on it, EDCs, a lot of people have worked on plans over the years, and yet nothing happens. And so my question is, how do you attract the people that have number one, the vision, number two, the staying power, if you're not going to exercise the leadership to get these things going?
Well, that's a good question. We have met with FDOT. We have asked them to come up with a plan for the trail. It's the trail in Sarasota. We call it 41. Somewhere we ought to work on that creative titling of streets. We have Manatee Avenue in Manatee, but you get out east, we're 64. I don't know how we do that. But we've talked to FDOT. We're partnering with them. We've asked them for their help. How can they help us on 41 down by the universities in making that a safer area? When you're coming north out of Sarasota, it's 4-lane with a landscape median. And then you get to the county line with Manatee, and you can put the pedal to the metal because it's wide open. 6-lane, go as fast as you can, all the way up to Cortez. We need to work with them about how do we landscape that? How do we make that nicer? They have ideas. They're going to come back to us with those ideas. We're working with the University of South Florida on how we can manage traffic in that area in conjunction with FDOT and their folks. The same thing we're working with FDOT on 15th Street as they begin the design of the reconstruction of that roadway. That's important. We also understand that we've started with this southwest quadrant, but you know, the 41 corridor runs all the way up to Tampa. We got to go north of the river at some point in time, There's a lot of neighborhoods in that area that we need to focus on as we continue to redevelop the urban core of Manatee County. When ULI was in here, they emphatically stated, you know, all those developments out east of 75, they'll take care of themselves. What we need to focus on is the west side. We've started with this quadrant, but there's more to come. We just need to focus our attention and our rules, because we need a different way of looking at developing the west side of the county. It's important to make it happen. Good question.
Yeah.
I'm going to give you a little more of a developer perspective, since there's probably more than one developer in Manatee County than myself in infill. Let's take the 41 corridor. I think part of that is, if you notice, wherever there's a need, a developer will come in and fill that need by building something. It's not being built on 41, and there must be a reason. And the reason is, at the current economic levels and the current conditions that exist on 41 don't give you the opportunity to attract a user to that piece of property. It's as simple as that. The ways that you attract somebody to look at as a developer, because by the way, we do like to make money. I mean, we are for-profit. And I learned in any kind of deal, everybody has to be positive on the deal or it doesn't work. And so the county has to be positive by doing things, as Ed described, on changing the roadway segment through there, because it is terrible from that perspective. They have to change land use codes to allow you to do different things. There may be incentive. There has to be a level where the developer is coming up with the risk they're taking, and the public is dropping some of theirs to form that private-public partnership to a level then, and there is a level at some point where a user says, I'm going there. And I think this is a good first start of that, of being able to work that private-public partnership to be able to get there where you do have something then that you can take to these areas.
Norm, did you want to say something?
Sure. Right. I agree with both of the speakers before me. There are a lot of challenges in that area. About 10 years ago, I talked to a shopping center developer about why this area wasn't developing, and one of the things she said is because of the neighborhoods around there. So, you know, you bring those up. The other thing is she brought up is the area by the airport. Cars are driving so fast, they don't even see what's around them, or, you know, that's a speedway in that area. So, you know, putting the traffic calming, whether it's a median, you know, you can put the speed limit at 45, but they're still going to go as fast as they can, especially when they get out of Sarasota and get, you know, it's just the way it is. So you do have to address that. And there's some very undesirable land uses down there, the lingerie places, Kinky Cat, for instance. And those, nobody wants to be near those. So you need to have some kind of land use regulations to get rid of those in order to attract the residential areas and stuff like that. I live near those, so I'm not making that up. So they're there, and we need to get rid of those things that actually deter higher quality users.
Okay, well, actually, I had another question, but the time is really up, and I don't want to hold you all, so I won't ask it, but I will afterwards. Thank you very much. It's been a very informative program. Thank you all very much for being here. We do meet in December, the first Thursday in December, and it looks like, although it's not firmed up yet, that we will have kind of everything you've always wanted to know about Ebola planning in our county, and we're afraid to ask. There's a lot going on, and it's an interesting issue because it's really going to elevate our county's preparedness for a lot of things. And it's changed a lot of relationships, the kind of planning that's had to take place. And I think that you all be very pleased and interested to hear all the things that are going on and understand the risks and benefits of the changes that are being made. So I hope to see you next month. Bring friends, bring new members, and have a great day. So thank you.